save the world from aliens and then bring all the aliens back again?
Where are you going?
The roof!
I will talk to the doctor.
Oh, will you? That's nice. Hello.
Who exactly are you?
Well, that's the question.
I demand to know who you are. I don't know.
Clear the floor. He's on his way up here. With a gun.
Well, I reckon you're mad. Pair of you. It's like you go looking for trouble.
Trouble's just a bit in between. It's brand new to me. All those planets, creatures and horizons. I haven't seen them yet. Not me, though. And it is gonna be fantastic.
You can spend the rest of your life with me. But I can't spend the rest of mine with you. I have to live on. Alone.
I can feel it. The turn of the earth. The ground beneath our feet is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and the entire planet is hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and I can feel it. We're falling through space, you and me. Clinging to the skin of this tiny little world, and if we let go, that's who I am.
When you are a time traveler, there is one place you must never go. One place in all of space and time you must never, ever find yourself.
I don't age. I regenerate. That's the curse of the Time Lords.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Geekfest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and joining me today I have James here. Say hi, James.
Hello.
Today we are continuing with a previous episode that we started a while back having to do with the Doctor Who franchise. We previously talked about how, in James's particular way, how he got hooked on the show and how he figured out what he considers to be the golden age of Doctor Who, which was his favorite part or period of the whole franchise, and how it's kind of moved forward. And last time we were talking about, we kind of stopped around the time where Fox took a shot at it and did it their own little TV movie, which was at a time where Doctor Who was completely gone from everybody's radar. And in how that part, even though it wasn't as successful as the current incarnation of Doctor Who, it at least provided somewhat of a bridge for people who had either no idea what Doctor Who was about, or people who actually did used to like Doctor Who, and all of a sudden they were giving something new. Now, like we mentioned before, technically you could consider that a failure in terms of the movie didn't continue in terms of using the same actors or producers or settings or anything like that, but at least it kind of reminded everybody that, hey, everybody, we have this thing called Doctor Who that some of you, especially the younger viewers, and even some of older viewers who might not never had a chance to get into it, were able to all of a sudden say, wait a minute, what's this all about? And I think, as I believe you also mentioned before, James, it did provide, even for the hardcore fans, a chance to say, oh, that's right, here we go. Here's a possibility of something that could take us somewhere else. And as we're going to talk about it today, that's exactly what it did. It brought us to the modern age of Doctor Who. Now, James, remind us a little bit again, the era that got you into the show, that actually was your gateway, I guess, into the show, was the Tom Baker years, correct?
That's right, in the 70s.
Tell us about where are we now?
Well, this is it. This is the 50th anniversary. It doesn't get any bigger than this. Next year, Star Trek's 50th anniversary. We've just had James Bond's 50th anniversary. The Beatles coming to America. This is a big deal. When a franchise can last that long, it's pretty exciting. And the thing is with Doctor Who, it looked like it would never make it to the 50th anniversary. It was 26 years, plus the 1 year that we had the Fox movie. And then after that, it was back to the woods.
I can't think of any other franchise that took such a hiatus from itself.
Star Trek was only gone for 10 years when it was gone, and it really wasn't gone. It actually got bigger in the syndicated years with the cartoon and the books and the conventions. Mm-hmm. So with Doctor Who, I would say the fans were still there, but other than DVDs and some online material and stuff like that, it really wasn't looking good. But the best thing that could have happened with Doctor Who was the resurgence of science fiction again, and BBC having that property and saying, well, let's see if we can give it a look again. And luckily, a writer named Russell T. Davies had a plan and had an idea of what he could do to reinvent it without stepping on what had come before.
Now, what year are we talking about here? Like around what range?
Well, the show came back relaunched in 2005. So we're talking around the 2003-2004 ballpark, where the meetings and the discussions of how could this happen? How could they go about this? And Davies had decided he wanted to embrace the past. Some people wanted to start fresh, not worry about it, all the backstory. Well, he basically said, look, we don't have to worry about the backstory. What we do want to do is have this history available to us. So instead of doing what the Fox movie did, which was to bridge the old series with the new series with a regeneration, people had not even been born. Today's audience that they were looking to reach hadn't even been born the last time Doctor Who was on TV. So what they did was start fresh. And by doing that, as always, the companions were very important. But in this case, the companion was us again. And Rose, played by Billie Piper, who was a young pop star at the time in England, she was going to be our gateway to this mysterious new person, this mysterious new doctor. And instead of doing a whole regeneration, and this is what you need to know, and there was 26 years and 7 guys before him, and then the 8th guy in the movie, Davies, that is, said, we are going to have that in our back pocket if necessary, but we're going to start fresh like it's new. But we don't need to actually explain all that stuff yet. Let's get the people knowing who this is and what this whole experience is about.
Can you think of any reasons why all of a sudden science fiction might have become more popular? Because this is Britain we're talking about. If it was the U.S., we could say, well, Battlestar Galactica was popular.
No. Battlestar Galactica was huge in the U.K. In fact,
so you think it might have helped?
In fact, the series aired in the U.K. before it aired here. And if
That's
you were,
right.
if
It
you were
had
a
a slight-
savvy,
yeah.
if a savvy internet
That's
sleuth,
right.
you were able to find episodes online before they aired here in
So
Sci-Fi
that
on Sci-Fi
That might
Channel.
have helped the popularity.
Exactly. And the resurgence of Star Wars, various other, the mystery of Harry Potter. They were looking for something that fit that Saturday evening time slot.
Sci-fi fantasy.
And they said, let's see if we can dust this off. There's always been talk of it. There's always been people trying to do something. We've got this property. Let's see what we can do with it. And this guy made it work. So they hired Christopher Eccleston, who surprisingly was interested. He actually contacted Davies and said, I'd like to try out for this. And while Eccleston wasn't a household name by any means, he was a respected actor and not somebody who you would think would be a Doctor Who.
I only knew him from 28 Days Later.
Yeah, exactly. That was
That's
a couple
it.
years before, and he had been in some other movies, respectable movies, but a lot of people were actually impressed that this guy believes in this project. So everything's announced. They're producing the show. The show launches, and people love it. The first episode was called Rose, and it was basically Rose meeting the Doctor, this mysterious person. But he's really a down-to-earth guy. However, for old fans, you can read into it and realize this is a Doctor who's had some time behind him, that has some baggage, has seen some really rough times. And it turns out they wrote it that this Doctor is now the last of the Time Lords, the last of the travelers from Gallifrey. Gallifrey was destroyed. We don't know exactly why. We don't know what's going on, but he's it. And he basically takes Rose on this adventure. And at the same time, she takes him and kind of rehabilitates him in a way, in a subtle way. It's not spoken of per se, but her humanity helps him because clearly he's seen a bitter war of some type. Something has happened that has really changed this person, and now he needs this companion to, I guess, rejuvenate him.
Now, because this is a British show, are we dealing with short seasons or longer seasons?
13 episodes.
It's a typical British formula.
And I think that works a lot better, and I think a lot of TV shows in America should give it a try because you've got series that have potential, but they have to stretch them out for 20 episodes or more, or many seasons. For instance, the American version of Life on Mars might have succeeded if they kept it tight, but they had to make it a season.
They're slowly getting into that now. Cable does it a lot.
They're really
but
doing a good
networks,
job
I've
of it.
seen them doing that when they do like a mid-season replacement type of show. Sometimes it'll be a short season.
Yeah, I think they would really be better off taking the budgets that they're given, and they, doing the British style for a lot of these shows. There's certain shows that just go on way too long, and by the end of it, they don't know where to go. They have to drag out a premise that really should be a tight,
right. And they've been
strong
doing this for a long time.
Anyway, back to The Doctor. This season was fantastic. I wound up seeing it on a plane heading to London, and I was thrilled. I really at first it seemed weird. The theme is a similar theme. The police box is still there, which is the TARDIS, but the interior of the TARDIS is now much more dramatic, bigger, exciting, and that's the difference in the new budgets and the new style of shooting, that this is what this show could have been all along, but because it's basically a stage play shot on television, they had to have cheap sets.
It no longer looks like when they're indoors, it's public access, and when they're outdoors, it's 16 millimeter documentary.
This is shot the same way. It looks
matches.
good.
Everything matches now.
But let me tell you about Eccleston. I mean, he was great, but you want to know the sad fact? When he launched, several days later, it was announced in the press that he's leaving the show.
That fast? I don't remember it being that fast.
Basically, he lasted a year, one season, and he was going to regenerate.
But wasn't it part of his deal that he wanted to do it for one season?
No, I think they were plans for him to go a little longer, and something happened. And he's reluctant to say exactly what happened. He said that he didn't get along with the bosses. Now, I don't know if that means the bosses of the BBC or the bosses of the show. I've never heard him say outright that Russell T Davies was a jerk towards him or this producer or that producer. What I think is they were shooting movie style very fast, and he is more of an actor who wants to do it right rather than be running and gunning. That's my guess. So he has been reluctant to be involved after that, which may have not been terrible for the show. He launched the show, and I think those are the strongest episodes of the redo.
He's my favorite one of the new ones.
Me too. And it's not that I don't like the other ones. I just think if you watch those episodes, except for maybe one episode where it's more kiddie-like, fart jokes, things like that, I think they were very strong, and people should, kiss him when they see him if they're Doctor Who fans for doing such a good job, as well as Russell T Davies for putting together stories that people really were impressed with and brought back the audience.
Yeah. To me, he was more, and again, it's my particular style of what I like, he was more serious. I like seriousness.
There's an episode called Boomtown, which is in the second half of his season. And basically we had some adventures. We've had the Dalek has returned. We find out that he was responsible for ending the Time War, which was a huge battle between the Time Lords and the Daleks. And something he did ended it in a catastrophic way, making him the sole survivor.
Okay.
And with that, he has this survivor's guilt maybe, or battle fatigue, whatever it is that happened. We're not really supposed to know yet what happened, but this guy has seen it all.
But this is part of the arc of the show. Not only the freak of the week, but now you're talking about arc. You're talking about the thing that will continue from episode to episode and hopefully season to season, how we slowly peel away the layers of the character.
And we find out that this isn't just some guy. He's got some history now since the last time we saw him. But anyway, this particular episode, there's a lot of discussions on who are you basically to be in charge. Like, there's somebody he has to bring justice to. Is he really at liberty to do that? Is he the guy who should set things right and make this person, this creature who's done something wrong, the fall guy? Is he allowed to do that? And as you watch this episode, this isn't just some kid's show at this point. If you're an adult fan, you're reading into it and you're realizing you can't just be the world police. You can't just be the universe police, which may have been timely at, in 2005 because of all the Iraq and Afghanistan situations. Who is really the leader? Who's really in charge and allowed to do this kind of stuff? And the Doctor, while he's trying to do right, obviously has done some wrong at times. And with Rose's help, trying to do the right thing going forward.
Now, how often did the new series, especially the first season, dip into classic bad guys or bring in new bad guys?
Well, right from the get-go, the Nestine consciousness, which were known as basically window dummies, they were from the 70s, and they were the first new bad guy brought back, which it made it fun.
The budgets were a lot lower back then, so all they had was
people dressed up. It looked like people dressed up as dummies, except back then there were just a lot of dummies.
because the budgets.
But it was really well done. And then they brought back the Dalek. And that almost wasn't going to happen. There were plans for a new Dalek type, robo life form hybrid type of creature if they couldn't get the rights to it because the Daleks were owned by Terry Nation. They did get the rights, and it was one of the best episodes of the old and the new series.
There is another faction here that owns a portion of the
character
franchise?
of the Daleks were created by Terry Nation. He and his estate had the rights to it, even back then.
How? How do you do that? Well,
because at the time, the way he wrote it, they brought him in. It must have been in his contract that
he gets to keep the rights of what he writes.
So
Holy smokes.
when they made Dalek toys back then, he would get a lot of it, and it was licensed to the BBC.
Wow.
We talked about in the last episode, they made 2 Dalek Doctor Who movies with Peter Cushing. They were able to do that with those characters because they weren't the sole. It's not like the Stormtroopers and Darth Vader are Lucasfilm.
This is like the Thunderball thing where one person is doing a Bond and another person is doing a pseudo Bond.
It's exactly similar type of situation. So they did get the rights, no problem, and that turned out to give us an understanding that what we think is the last Dalek is being held by this collector, and the Doctor stumbles upon it, and when he realizes there's a Dalek, it freaks him out. It makes him want to run for the hills because he's thinking he's conquered these Daleks finally at the expense of his own people. And now here's another one. But it turns out this particular Dalek is damaged. It doesn't have full capabilities yet at this point. So then it suddenly sets him off on a revenge type thing. Like, I got you. I beat you. You're nothing. And then the story unfolds from there.
Now, you mentioned before they didn't want to talk about the past too much in this new season. They wanted to kind of hit everything. I mean, the past exists. They just don't want to delve into it too much. But eventually, how do they delve into something like the regeneration of the Doctors and that sort of thing?
Well, because it was outed that he was regenerating right after the first episode aired, they had to discuss it, and they had to publicly look for a new Doctor. And I think they had a plan based on when they hired Eccleston, they had other people in mind. And that's usually what's been happening as the years go on. You might hire you to be the Doctor, but they've also interviewed me, and they've interviewed, 2 other guys.
Just in case.
And they know kind of, well, if you don't accept it or you're too expensive, then they'll go with James, or they'll go with, Joe Blow. So usually what happens is the next guy that guy is considered again in the future. And David Tennant was somebody they had considered to be the new Doctor Who when they came back.
And what was his background?
Well, David Tennant was known for being in a Harry Potter movie right before he became Doctor Who, as well as other movies. In fact, he shared a movie with Christopher Eccleston. There's a movie out there where the two of them performed together. As 2 different, completely different characters. It's just a coincidence that they wind up, in the same character years later. So David Tennant's announced. There's some PR. They certainly wanted to keep that more of a surprise. And you can understand why, because modern television, it's like that's your big
it's a cliffhanger.
finale.
Yeah, that's...
So the regeneration is very dramatic, much more so than in the past. And David Tennant appears. And like the character of Rose, who's in that episode, we're supposed to feel like, what now? Now, a lot of us who watched Doctor Who in the past realize, okay, that's a way for a new guy to take over, but you're still on edge, wondering how is this guy going to perform? Is it going to be somebody you like, or is it going to be somebody who annoys you? Which is kind of what happened with Colin Baker when he took over from Peter Davison. In his attempt to try to differentiate himself from everybody who came, he went too far over the line, and he basically made himself unlikable, and people responded by tuning out. David Tennant, completely the opposite. David Tennant is the modern equivalent of Tom Baker in the sense that he was so beloved that many of the new people, even you almost forget there was a Christopher Eccleston when you talk to people, because when they say Doctor Who, the modern generation automatically think of David Tennant.
Well, plus he spent so much time on it.
Well, David Tennant was there for about 4.5 years.
Which is much more than 1 year.
Well, exactly. You got me there. But while Eccleston was, I feel, responsible for bringing the character back to life, Tennant was the one responsible for making Doctor Who now as big of an icon as it's ever been. Mm-hmm. And I say that not because his episodes were so great. He had a handful of really, really good episodes and a handful of some episodes that I find very tedious. But as a person, as an actor, and as the character, he is so likable. He's good looking for the young girls. He's adventurous for the guys. He's funny. He's witty. All these things that you want in a character, this guy brought to this character. And quirkiness of somebody who's supposed to be playing a Time Lord.
Well, the other thing I would imagine that helped the show to succeed, not only having a secondary doctor now, modern doctor that's likable, is the fact that people actually have access to this show without having to bend over backwards. You mentioned last time we talked that, sometimes they would play the shows kind of out of order and you would have to watch it at a certain time on a Saturday only in the middle of the day, back when there were no VCRs, no DVRs. So you were basically chasing this show around that was imported from England. Now you just tune into, what was it, like Sci-Fi?
It's funny you mentioned that. Let me explain something. When the show came back, it wasn't available in America right away. It was airing on BBC One in the UK. Over here, people were getting it either by torrent-type downloads and passing them along. I received the entire season from a friend who was able to do some sort of internet search and manipulation.
Manipulation is the key word.
I don't know how he did it. I don't know if it was something illegal. I'll never know. However,
you'll never tell.
It was offered to Sci-Fi Channel. And Sci-Fi Channel had Battlestar Galactica at that point and felt that they were the kings of the hill. And their comment was, not quite exact words, we don't want to deal with that inferior type of show while we have some of these other fantastic shows. And at the time, I guess, it was Battlestar, Stargate, a couple other type of shows. But that was basically the golden age of Sci-Fi Channel. So while they might have had a point based on the past, the idea of Doctor Who was still this cheesy show from the 70s and 80s. This was not the same Doctor Who. And they dropped the ball. And eventually, I don't know financially if it cost them more when it came back or how the deal was met, but it did come back to Sci-Fi. And about a year and a half later, the show started airing. And there was a slight delay for the first, obviously the first Eccleston season was about a year and a half later. The first Tennant season was a year after it had aired in the UK. So people were getting frustrated who were big fans like myself. Other fans were just catching on now. And who's this Doctor Who? And they're loving it. And merchandise, figures, toys, books, everything is back in a big way. When finally everybody got caught up, it became an event for the new Doctor Who season, just like a new season of Breaking Bad or a new season of Downton Abbey. And going forward, it's never been bigger. I'm actually overwhelmed how many people say they like Doctor Who now, because it was my dirty little secret back in the 70s. I don't know what I could compare it to, but it's like coming out and finding out, oh, your dad wears ladies' underwear? What? You like Doctor Who?
Wait, I'm sorry, what are you talking about again?
What is this scarf you're wearing? Who is this Doctor Who? What is Doctor Who? They make, it's like all kinds of jokes. I guess it was the same thing for people in the, in the 60s and the early 70s who said they love Star Trek. And next thing you know, it's off the air. It's like, you like what? Dr. Spock? No. So anyway, Doctor Who is huge now. Well, it came to the point where David Tennant said, I'm going to leave. Basically, he did 3 years plus a year of specials. And that was their way to extend him another year without him being locked into the role. He was able to shoot a little bit. And he had other projects. He wanted to do some Shakespeare. He didn't want to be typecast. That's the hardest thing about this role. And I think a lot of roles. I don't know how it's going to affect American actors from things like Breaking Bad. Is he now always Walter White? Or can he get roles? Is Captain Kirk is 80-something years old and he's still Captain Kirk no matter what show he's done. T.J. Hooker, he's been in Boston Legal. He's Captain Kirk. His tombstone is going to say, here lies Captain Kirk, William Shatner. So I guess you can understand it, and if it's a working actor, you need to work. When people found out David Tennant was leaving, they were really distraught because some people didn't really know any other Doctor. Like I said, Eccleston was there, but he was only there a year.
Brief,
so
yeah.
He's the 9th Doctor. He's okay. But this is the 10th Doctor. What are we going to do with ourselves? And I even felt, what are you going to do to top this? I didn't love every episode, but I liked him a lot, and I couldn't see what they were going to do.
Well, let me ask you a question going back a little bit. When we were talking about the seasons, and you're talking about Tennant doing these specials every now and then, are these like these Christmas specials they do at the end of the year?
Well,
does that count as an episode, or is it a special? How do you work that out?
It's not a series, as they call it.
Right.
It's the David Tennant special. So there were 4.
It's like a bonus.
There's Christmas specials, and then there was an Easter special, which wasn't called an Easter special, but it was aired at the Easter holiday.
And how long are these episodes, these specials?
Like a regular episode,
It's
like
the
maybe an
equivalent-
hour, and maybe the regular ones were about 50 minutes, 40 or 50 minutes. These might have been like an hour and
Hour and
10
a half,
minutes.
a little
They
bit,
they
okay.
could stretch it out a little bit because of how they were playing it. And when he ended, they did part of the two specials. They did a Christmas special and a New Year's special. So his final episode is really two parts, and he regenerates on New Year's Day. And it was kind of, upsetting to a lot of people. And when they announced who the 11th Doctor would be, the picture that they showed of Matt Smith, who they chose, he was the youngest guy who had ever been chosen to play the Doctor. He was 26. And when you saw his picture, he had this crazy looking hair. He was posed in a way wearing like a sport coat that made him look kind of like weird. And people were actually like, is there something wrong with this guy? Like, is he up for it? And I remember they did a little special little thing like a Saturday night, and then the word went out, as it does now in the internet age, Twitter, and the picture. And I was like, I had learned enough from all my years to say, okay, let's give this guy a chance. They're not picking a guy off the street. There must be something about him we like.
Contest winner.
But I've got to tell you,
Fan of the month.
I didn't know, how is this guy going? He didn't appear handsome in this picture. He didn't appear, you're just seeing a still picture.
Now, do they
He
always
didn't-
work it out that, at least in modern times, that whoever is the new Doctor will make the cameo at the end of the previous season?
Yeah, that was almost
Is that
tradition back then.
Okay.
In the classic years.
So they give you a face, but then you have to kind of wait a while.
This was a face that we just got for the announcement.
Oh, okay.
Then we had to wait. I think in this situation, it was about 2 or 3 months for the episode to air.
For the final
and to
episode.
get the first look. And if you watch the final David Tennant episode, and the moment you see Matt Smith, it's jarring. It's not terrible. It's just jarring. And you literally go from my hero to who's this guy? And it happens. That's the way it always happens. People, for as great as regeneration is, people forget sometimes that, like, oh my God, what did they just do? Where's my guy? At least with the new James Bond, they have an actor's been announced, and you go and you see his movie.
But usually you don't introduce him.
You've just watched the most, probably the saddest episode of your hero's run in the show, and then 2 seconds later, there's this new guy doing and acting however he is, wearing the old guy's outfit. And David Tennant even made a comment in some of the books I've read. His comment was, you're the cat's pajamas. You're the guy. Everybody's fawning over you. And the moment you're seen, everybody says, thank you. They clap. David's done. Have a good day. And everybody's now on top of this guy, bringing him in, and they're setting him to take over the role and pick up where your regeneration ended. And it's just, you're walking away almost like the Hulk at the end of his episode. Like, I'm done. I'm gone. It's over. Now there's this guy. So it's kind of like a weird situation for the actor as well as for the audience.
It's like a graduation.
I've read a lot about the actors who played the part, and some of them were bitter. Tom Baker was actually, he wasn't bitter towards Peter Davison, but he was bitter at the end of the role because it's like, I'm the Doctor. This is my role. I've done it for 7 years. And now this guy is stepping into my role. And, I guess it depends on what kind of person you are. If you're very, protective of the roles you do, that sounds pretty hard. It's like, here's new dad. Bring new dad in because you're done. Anyway, I digress. I apologize.
Let's talk about Matt Smith a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the feelings a lot of people had at the end of the David Tennant era when Matt Smith first appeared were instantly, and I mean instantly, washed away when Matt Smith's first episode, called The 11th Hour, launched. And I've got to tell you, that may be one of the best first episodes of a Doctor ever. He was disoriented in the very first episode. He was kooky, but the charming little thing that now, and I'm sorry if I didn't mention this, at this point, Russell T. Davies had decided to leave the show. The guy who brought it back from the dead had decided to leave, which is almost unheard of. It's almost like, it's almost like Jerry Seinfeld stopping doing Seinfeld, and there's still Seinfeld going on, but, he decided not to do it. And you're like, wow, this guy saved the show. What's going to happen? But there's another writer named Stephen Moffat, who himself has been a huge fan. Stephen Moffat's brilliant plan was to initiate the new companion to the Doctor and to the audience, but as a little girl. So the Doctor meets Amelia Pond when she's maybe 10 years old in her backyard when he crashes the TARDIS. But then he comes back thinking he's 5 minutes later, and he's many years later, and now she's a grown woman, and now he has to put 2 and 2 together. She's gone through all these years having had met this crazy guy in a box and everybody telling her how she's crazy, you need a doctor, psychiatrist, whatever the situation is, and here he's back. So it's kind of like meeting somebody when you're a kid and then nobody believing you, your invisible friend, and then your invisible friend comes back, and the first thing you want to do is, oh my God, everybody, look, I told you, he's right here. And that's how they did the introduction of the new Doctor. And in addition to that, they did a throwback to all the doctors that came before him to say, on top of that, I'm the same guy as these guys.
So it's what they didn't want to do when they restarted the series.
Exactly.
They're doing it
They
now.
had almost come full circle that not only is this the same guy, we're putting it right in your face that it's the same guy plus, because we're so sure of who we are as the Doctor Who franchise, and to allay people's fears, both new young audience and older audience, that this is the 11th Doctor. This is the same guy you've been following since 1963 right here in front of you.
Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, as these doctors are changing, how about the companions? Are we changing hands with companions, or is there a rule to that, or there's no rule real?
As I said with Rose, which is probably the best character that they could have come up with as a companion, because Rose was likable, she was pretty, smart, and she made the Doctor a better person, just as he made her life more exciting. One companion who was very special in the modern series came from the classic series with John Pertwee and Tom Baker, and that's Sarah Jane Smith. Now, Elizabeth Sladen played her, and they brilliantly brought her back when you talked about what came back from the past, like the Daleks and some of the Cybermen and some of the other characters. Well, bringing her back gave us a way to see what happens when you're not with the Doctor anymore. The Doctor doesn't like saying goodbye. Usually the characters are left behind, and we as an audience never know what happened to all these characters. Well, we find out here because they stumble upon a plot that she's also investigating as a journalist 30 years later from when she was with the Doctor. And when the Doctor realizes who she is, and then she realizes, it's a combination of heartbreak because now this person has been wanting to revisit the Doctor all these years, and then also you get to find out with the Doctor, like, what's to come for his present companion, who's Rose and various. And one of the characters, Mickey, makes a comment, it's really tough when the ex meets the current girlfriend type of thing. So it's just a weird situation how that episode came about, and you basically get to meet a character of the Doctor's past, and now the Doctor, it's a little bit interesting. Well, when Rose leaves under the David Tennant years at the end of the first David Tennant season, it's one of the saddest finales ever. And unfortunately, I can't really get people to watch that. But if you've watched it from the first Eccleston episode to that episode, it breaks your heart. I mean, it's very sad. And I'm not usually a tearjerker kind of guy or anything, but you feel like there's a real sense of loss to the series when that happens. And when she leaves, what happens. And if you've watched the show, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't watched it, it's something it's a
landmark moment for the show.
Yeah, look forward to it. As sad as it is, look forward to it because it's really special. After that, they tried to bring in another woman who was really a good character, and her name was Martha Jones. And she was, while Rose was just a teenage, almost, 20-year-old, high teens, early 20s girl, Martha was a medical student. She was smart, and they went in a completely different direction eventually. And they wrote the character the same way people felt about the character. She was the other woman, or she was rather the rebound assistant, the rebound companion. And Martha's character liked the Doctor, liked him, as a potential relationship situation. But without actually having a relationship with Rose, they were a couple. And the Doctor felt everything going forward came back to Rose, in a sense. And Martha knew that, and the audience knew that. So I think, as good as of a character that she was, she never caught on. And it's pretty obvious after the first season that they're
changing her again.
Yeah, and while she didn't leave the show, she left the show. She left the Doctor and made appearances later on from time and again. But they brought in a new character. And this one seemed to be better. And this one was Catherine Tate. And Catherine Tate was a well-known comedian, a Lucille Ball type character for the modern age. Very funny, a little chubby at the time, so she seemed bigger than life. And modern audiences will know her from The Office. She played in the later years of The Office. One of the new bosses who eventually just sticks around once,
know exactly
everything's happening in that show. And she really caught on. She was, as even they joke, you want to be my mate. And she would do her comedy like, what do you mean, mister? We're not mating. And, it's like, it's obviously a little British comedy, but play on words. But they were mates. They were pals. And it helped the show. It helped David Tennant and it helped the show. So what happens to her by the end of her run is equally sad. Not as sad as Rose, but you get the feeling that, you've lost a good pal in Donna. So now we're back to the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, and his new companion is Amy Pond. She's grown up, pretty redhead from Scotland, and her boyfriend, who eventually is her husband, Rory. And for Matt Smith, Amy, and Rory, they were like the perfect team. Any fears that the audience had that this show was in trouble were blown away because they worked so well together. And while Matt Smith's episodes, I'd say some of them are not perfect, and the audience kind of has mixed feelings about it, Matt Smith is perfect. Matt Smith, to me, is even better Doctor than David Tennant. And I don't know why. I can't say exactly why. As young as Matt Smith is at 26, and, for the 3 years he does the role, he's between, say, 26 and 30. He plays a character who you clearly know could be 900 years old in that youth. His face... Remember how I said people thought, is there something wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
His face, his mannerisms, his style. This is a guy who's seen it all. This is a guy who's been around. He's been through good things in the early years. He's been through the Time War. His acting can handle that. And the fun stuff that they go through in the modern era. And I find him, as much as Eccleston is my favorite of the new three, Matt Smith is really a talented guy. And he's leaving now.
Now, how many years did he end up doing?
3.
So we're dealing with 1,
well, let's
4,
put it this way.
3?
Again, to tie in there's some of these specials. So it's hard to say. He did 3 series, but there are specials like Christmas specials. And then finally to where we are now is the 50th anniversary and the Christmas special. And the 50th anniversary is something that is an entity in and of itself.
Well, speaking of this 50th anniversary that's coming up next week, last time I heard anything about a 50th anniversary, which happens to also be a British thing, was the Bond reunion. Apparently for the Oscars, they were going to get together all the living Bonds, and that never happened. What the hell is this all about?
Pretty much the same thing. For some reason, it's hard to get people together via egos, age, girth, death.
Death gets in the way a lot.
Well... Every fan had been building up to it from the 25th anniversary to the 50th anniversary, saying there's going to be a humongous celebration. And at the very least, the modern fans expected to see Eccleston, Tennant, and Matt Smith together because tradition had it for the 10th anniversary was an episode called The Three Doctors. And it brought John Pertwee, Patrick Troughton, and William Hartnell, the 3 doctors of the time, together. For the 20th anniversary, they had the 5 doctors. Again, while death kept William Hartnell out of it, they recasted with another actor who looked almost the same.
Wow.
For all intents and purposes, he is a dead ringer. Now, I understand, pardon that pun, I apologize. He wasn't exactly the same guy. If you've watched Doctor Who and he was your guy from the beginning, you realize this is a different actor. But he's playing William Hartnell playing the Doctor. It's acceptable. Tom Baker, however, had only been out of the role for 1 year. And his ego, plus a little bit of wanting to give some space to the part, he chose not to participate. I think it was a mistake, and he's talked about it, how he says, while he doesn't admit it was a mistake, he said it was probably wrong, and in hindsight, he probably should have done it. But it's like if you leave your job or get fired from your job, you're unlikely to return next year for the big ceremony for, the boss or the retirement of the boss or something like that. It's just not likely to happen. And in this case, that's what happened. Well, the 30th anniversary, they kind of were off the air.
Okay.
And for the 40th anniversary, they hadn't yet relaunched. Well, the 50th anniversary is coming. Sadly, we've lost 3 doctors. Pertwee, Hartnell, and Troughton have all since passed. But we have Tom Baker. We have Peter Davison. We have Colin Baker. We have Sylvester McCoy. We have Paul McGann. And now we have Eccleston,
3 more.
Tennant, and Smith. This is going to be fantastic. They could either recast the other guys, maybe with the new modern technology, they do a Forrest Gump type thing, they fit them in and they interact. They've done it with Star Trek, that Cisco was mixing in.
Well, with all these trailers they're showing, it looks like they want to incorporate everybody, but we'll see.
They've done just about everything to tease you what they're not going to do. Some of the final episodes in the past season, the 7th season, leading up to the 50th anniversary, had images, like I just said. They took clips of the old doctors. They mixed them in with Clara, his new companion, being what her role in the series is and how she's helping them and how she is an aid to every one of these doctors throughout the history of the show somehow. And what do we get in the final scenes of the final episode of the season 7 leading up into the big celebration? Introducing John Hurt as the Doctor. It blew people's minds. Now, there had been rumors that John Hurt was participating, so people were getting a hint that something he's doing is big. But that's the big mystery. It turns out only Matt Smith and David Tennant are participating, as far as we know at this moment in time, with 3 days left to go, and John Hurt. Now, who is John Hurt? Is John Hurt, and if you see pictures of John Hurt, if you're a Doctor Who fan, this mystery has been going since last May. He's wearing Eccleston's jacket. He's wearing clothes similar to Paul McGann's last outfit from the Spock's one-off special. But he's John Hurt, bearded, scraggly looking like he's been through a war. Well, what war has been the front and center of the modern Doctor Who? The Time War. Does he fit in somehow with the Time War? Well, okay, maybe they wanted to find a way to keep Paul McGann from being the bad guy who did the dastardly deed. But people figured, my God, Paul McGann, he got one episode. This is our chance to see Paul McGann again. He still looks like he did back then. Put the wig back on him, or don't put the wig back on him. He could have gotten a haircut. People want to see these old doctors. John Hurt. I have no idea who John Hurt is. He's clearly somebody who is a doctor. He's clearly somebody who is this character, but he's apparently not a doctor. He's not the Doctor, because the line at the end of it, you gave up the title, basically. This is a title. This is a name I choose. This is not something blah, blah, blah. So John Hurt did something dastardly, apparently. And he says, well, I did this for sanity and peace. Again, this sounds exactly like this is the guy who ended the Time War. Now, is he the 9th Doctor? Is he the guy in between McGann and Eccleston? Which, obviously, breaks people's hearts, because they've got action figures that say the 9th Doctor, they've got books, they've got toys, they've got episodes. This is the 9th Doctor. David Tennant is the 10th Doctor. Matt Smith's the 11th Doctor. Oh my God, I've got to renumber everything.
8.5?
What are we going to do? Well, people have even come to saying maybe he's 8.5, since he's not the Doctor, but he's the incarnation between. It's like with the Star Trek ships. I love the Enterprise. Well, what Enterprise? Enterprise B. What Enterprise C? The D, the E. Everybody in every fandom has something that has to have. This is the Bible. This is the consistency we live with. How are you telling me this is another Doctor? Maybe he's the first Doctor. Oh, or maybe he's not quite. The Doctor became the Doctor after this guy did something. Is he? Some people are saying maybe he's the last Doctor. Well, according to the lore of the series as far back as the classic era, the Doctor is kind of like a bad character in his last incarnation, which is theoretically between his 12th and 13th incarnation. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I have seen so much stuff. There's a feeling that maybe he is McGann older. There's a feeling that maybe he's Eccleston in an alternate timeline. So he becomes Eccleston, but Eccleston doesn't regenerate. There's so many crazy different ideas that I hate to even say them, because when we do finally find out, it might be so ridiculously obvious that we didn't see it coming. And that's the funny thing. Stephen Moffat is a genius when it comes to red herrings. And I'm not talking about a tasty seafood dish.
So you think he's planting these bombs along the way?
I think he's planting these bombs all along, because he's made comments, well, wouldn't you want to meet the first Doctor? That's the Doctor you'd want to meet in the big
Sean
50th
Connery.
anniversary.
Patrick Stewart.
Wouldn't you want to see the Time War? But the Time War is Russell T Davies' thing. That's not Moffat's thing. Most of the time, a writer will want to prop up or revisit something he's created. Now, Moffat's created
Take ownership of it, yeah.
Yeah, Moffat's created some fantastic episodes and characters. I mean, River Song, for instance, is a character in the modern era that we didn't even mention that winds up being the Doctor's wife in a way. And she was a side character in an episode with David Tennant, who they realized, wait a minute, I've got this plan here, and he met her at the end of her life. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like they met in reverse. There's this whole history that River Song has had with the Doctor that David Tennant had no clue of, because he met her out of order. So it was very brilliant. So if they're doing something like that with the 50th anniversary and how these characters interact, well, we're not going to get the 11 Doctors. We're going to get the 2.5 doctors maybe or something, because at this point we've seen trailers, we've seen teasers. They're acknowledging still all these doctors, and they're calling them in a sense their numbers, which isn't really like gospel. That could be changed, I understand, but they're sticking to it in a sense, and they're calling Peter Capaldi the 12th Doctor at this point in time. When he comes, he's been announced as the new Doctor after Matt Smith, so we'll have to wait and see. So aside from this numbering, I guess we'll find out in a couple days what's going to happen and who this John Hurt character is. Mm-hmm. So basically, we're not going to get the 11 Doctors. The closest we're getting is Peter Davison, the 5th Doctor, having teamed up for a charity special, which is kind of like a mini episode with David Tennant. So 5 meets 10, and it was written by Stephen Moffat during the David Tennant years, and it's fantastic, and especially for me because I like Peter Davison so much. So seeing him again in his costume, the trouble is, you can tell he's older, he's heavier. They basically brushed that off, saying it's, disturbance in the time continuum or something like that. But people love to see the old, like the way the Star Trek movies were generally successful, because people liked seeing the old guys, even though William Shatner was 10 sizes bigger than his uniform, and Scotty was, old and, chubby. People like that. Whatever reason that is, we like what we like. It's the familiarity, it's, it makes you feel young again, whatever it is. So, unfortunately, I don't think we're getting that.
And that's where we're going to leave it here today, because we are going to continue this next week to see if we get something that, all these theories that James is throwing around, maybe one of them will be the one they use. Maybe they'll completely surprise everybody and come up with some secret thing that they've been keeping quiet and will knock everybody's socks off. Who knows? I just hope the anticipation is, not bigger than the actual delivery of what they're going to give us. Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to thank James for joining me today. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
And we will see you here next time, specifically next week, when we continue with this theme and examine the 50th anniversary special for Doctor Who that's coming right up. Until then, see you next time at Geekfest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
When you began all those years ago, sailing off to see the universe, did you ever think you'd become this? The man who can turn an army around at the mention of his name.
I got too big, Dorian, too noisy. Time to step back into the shadows.
Your real name is hidden. It burns in the stars, in the cascade of Medusa herself.
It's more than just a secret, isn't it?
If we knew his name, we might have a clue to all this.
Silence will fall when the question is asked.
You're a man with a long and dangerous past, but your future is infinitely more terrifying. The signs believe it must be averted.
What's so dangerous about my future?
On the fields of Trenzalore, at the fall of the 11th, when no living creature can speak falsely or fail to answer, a question will be asked. A question that must never, ever be answered. You can't run away from this.
I've been running all my life. Why should I stop?
Because now you know what's at stake, why your life must end. The silence are determined that the question will never be answered, that the Doctor will never reach Trenzalore.
I don't understand. What's it got to do with me?
The first question, the question that must never be answered, the oldest question in the universe, in plain sight, the question you've been running from all your life.
Yes, but what is the question?
It's the same story every time, and it always begins with the same 2 words.
What 2 words?
Doctor Who. Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who. Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who. Doctor Who.
If we knew his name, we might have a clue to all this.
Stop! That's not funny.
Oh, your dad wears ladies' underwear?